Hey guys, I am Tshepang Bambo, but you can always call me Tshepang Panda. And as we always say, welcome to yet another episode of Let's Talk UFS. And like we always already say, welcome to you, welcome to me, welcome to us. And right next to me, I have two lovely people from one of the parties and one of the organizations from on campus. And I'm just going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Hi guys.
Hi, I'm a bit nervous, but you're speaking to Silindokuhle, former RC First Years and mentorship of House VMN, former Human Rights Ambassador, and I was chairperson of the portfolio that I'm currently contesting, Student Development and First Generation.
I'm just going to ask you guys to project a bit so that we make sure that your audio is clear and very audible. So tell us about how it has been joining the EFF and being one of the political leaders for one of the most very radical political parties and political representations. How has it been?
Yeah, no, my brother. With regards to joining the EFFSC, I made the decision when I came first to the UFS in 2020. That's when I joined the EFF. I didn't even think about it twice because how conscious I was already of what needs to be happening in the country. I felt like EFF was the only party for me that resonates with how I feel as a person, how I want to see this country move forward. So joining their student wing, which is the EFFSC, was no brainer for me to join it. And after joining the EFFSC, it has been one journey where at first, of course, there are going to be any stumbling blocks, of course, right? But for me, currently, it has been a journey worthwhile taking because I've been accepted and welcomed with love and affection from both comrades, you understand? So it was a thing of joining the FFSC. For me, it was a no-brainer. I just had to join the FFSC because of how they speak to the question that needs to be done about South Africa, right? And what needs to happen with as far as education is concerned. So them believing in free, decolonized and well-resourced education was a no-brainer for me because as well, that's what I need for myself and for the future people that are coming after me, you understand? Mm-hmm.
So would you say you've always been concerned about social injustices and all matters that affect students in general and the citizens? Would that be true?
Yeah, that would be true because before I'm a student, I'm a community member. So of course, having gone through hardships in the community, so you feel those problems immediately. You understand, because they affect you as a person in the community before you even go to UFS or before you even go to VETS or anywhere, right? You come from a community. So now, the struggle, what's this thing? With that was having to think about it because I was also doing economics at school, right? So having to see that the policies that are being put in place are not necessarily in favor of us, the black and marginalized, you understand? So now, having done those things, I was like, no, something really needs to be done, right? But then I necessarily didn't have the platform to do so because the Congress movement, even its youth league, has been dead for quite some time. So some of us, we never necessarily had a political home where we can go and voice out our concerns with as far as the community is concerned. So hence I'm saying joining the EFFSC and the EFF as a whole was a no-brainer for me. It gave me a platform to actually raise out some of these concerns that people might have been misplacing at first. I understand? Yes,
so very interesting here you speak about challenges and speak about a lot of matters that may affect students and a lot of matters that you felt you needed to be part of them being addressed, right? So before I move on to you, Silindokuhle, I'd love to find out from you, Oguti, what challenge or what injustice or what problem do you think speaks to you most? What do you think is that one burning issue that you think you'd probably want to deal with or probably want to tap on?
That will be the issue of free quality education, because that in itself, after matric, all of us look forward to going to varsity, right? Not knowing the hardships you're going to go through in terms of funding and all of that, but you're just excited to go to varsity. When you arrive at varsity and you're without funding, Right, for myself, when I arrived, I didn't have funding, you understand? So I was a self-funded student when I arrived. So now it was a thing of like having to pay one module is around 4,000, right? And you're doing 4 modules at the time, so it's 4,000 times 4, meaning it's 16,000 per month, per semester. And your parents don't even earn that much per month, you understand? And you're supposed to then now have to be able to deal with the university always asking you for money to pay back their money. And also with NSFAS, it doesn't necessarily fund us or give us that hope that it is free education, because even the NSFAS bursary scheme has its own limitations, right? It has its own criteria for which students qualify and which ones do not, right? Even if they, for example, you surpass the income, you're not allowed to get funding, but you might find that you surpassing that income, that requirement, is not only because you can afford university, right? It's just because your parents is just above that pay grade at the moment in time, but there are still other things that need to be covered before they can pay for your tuition fees, right? So I think NSFAS and free quality education is something that's burning for us as students and needs to be addressed.
I think it's a very important platform for us to be able to sit down with politicians and like student leaders, because you know, when you think about it, you're thinking of all these people who are always so like, you could say violent, or always so energetic and crazy, and you're thinking, Oguti, what's the first thing you want to talk about? And I'm thinking, Oguti, when you come into this space, you're probably going to bash any other party or anything like that. But it's lovely to hear that before you are a student leader, you're also a human being, and there's like a certain level or a certain ground that you also belong to, right? And I can also attest to us being black people, because I remember when I also first came into the varsity space, I personally also come from a black family, and you think about it, you see the tuition fees and you get an email, and then you think about it, how am I going to be able to pay all of this? And you remember at a certain point, you want to call home, but you can't, because at home they also call to you and they ask for stuff like that, right? So I'm going to give you a chance. You mentioned that we are students, right? And I'd like Silindokuhle to answer this one, because now you speak about us being students, and at the end of the day, there are like assignments, there's schoolwork, there's always that you are a university student before you are a student leader, much as you may be a voice for the voiceless or an activist. Is it okay for me to say you're an activist, considering that you said you were also the human rights ambassador, right? Now my question is, how do you find the balance between your schoolwork and your work of activism?
I think perspective is very important when answering or rather tackling such a question, because the moment you view student activism as something that requires a lot of you, so by this I mean the moment you view student activism as an obligation, it becomes problematic, because then your perception towards it changes and it becomes negative, because now you view it as something that you have to do. You view it as a duty, of which that is not how it is. It's basically like a lifestyle for us. It's a part of who we are. It's not to say but we are obligated to do it. It's something that we willingly put ourselves in to, rather. It's something that we willingly put ourselves into, and it's not a duty. It's literally a way of life. So by virtue of it being a way of life and by virtue of it being part of our lifestyle, then it becomes easier for us to navigate around our academics, because student activism is who we are. So then the one thing that we do have to navigate around is academics, because that is the one thing that is systematic here.
I can hear that. And I remember walking down here to prepare for this interview. You were speaking a lot about student activism, and you were speaking a lot about like being a student leader and you guys being relevant and having being fully equipped to lead students, right? But I also would like to find out now, Uguti, what would you say is like the importance of having like a political whole? How would you emphasize on us having a political whole?
Let me give this one to Tshepang, because if I answer it, I don't want to be too controversial, so I'll just give it to Tshepang.
I want to find out, Uguti, why do I not have hot water or something? Why am I not getting a cup of hot water or something? Yeah, it's fine. You still remember the question? No, I just want water.
The question was the importance of having a political home, right? For us as activists, right? Of course, when you are firstly conscious before you even decide about joining any organization, you're just first of as an independent person that's conscious about what needs to happen or how things must be, right? But now, when you do enter an organization and you become a member of the organization, you get to find that there are people that resonate with what you think in mind, right, or what you need to achieve, right? So it also assists you in terms of helping you to achieve those goals. Because then now, if you're around the people that you are always with, and those people are activists, it means you're more likely to increase your activism, or you're even more aware of what needs to be done in the other space, because you get to learn from other people's experiences while it's having what's the thing, you guys belong in the same home, right? As much as there's criticism and what, but at the end of the day, you know that these people have my support because we've been through a lot together. Yeah. Like, for example, if we've been to prison together because of striking, that brings us all together because of our activists. We understand that going to prison is part of the job, right? So now when you come from prison with those people, you somewhat build like some companionship with the fighters. It doesn't have to be a relationship where now it goes beyond organizational barriers, but even within the organization you can still love one another as members of the organization, which means if you are being ridiculed in public or you are being criticized in public, I myself, even though I have an issue with you, but since we belong in the same organization, I'm going to defend you, because that's how it is. We're going to defend you organizationally, because that's how we're taught to behave outside the other structures. So that's the importance of having a political home. It guides you and also nurtures you in your quest for being an activist or complete activist, or even somewhere further apart from activism, right? Meaning now you're going to be in the legislatures or in parliament, right? That in itself just builds you up to be that person that you desire to be in the political space.
I have something to
yes.
say as well.
Okay, yeah, before that, I hear you loosely throw that if you come from prison together, would you then say that it can go as far as prison is concerned?
It has.
It has went to prison, my brother.
Really?
We were arrested last year during, I think it was during March, for registration. Then there were other students that were arrested this year during registration again. So we are not saying that we're quite familiar with jail, but the system is always against us, so they always want to throw us in jail. Yes.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you a chance.
Also, just to add on to what Tshepang said, I think another important note, or rather important thing to take note of with regards to the importance of having an organizational home, is the concept of accountability. When you belong to an organization, it's easy for people to hold you accountable because there is a structure that they can refer to. When you are an individual, when you are an independent individual, it becomes difficult for people to hold you accountable, because it becomes easier for you to remove yourself from your responsibility and your duties. So then, by virtue of you belonging to an organization, it then becomes relatively easier for people to know where to look, if I can put it like that. Also, for the purpose of having like ideology, because organizations are founded on ideology, and ideologies advise the way in which we think. Ideologies advise our worldviews, basically. So then, by belonging to a certain organization, you resonate with the ideologies of that particular organization, and those ideologies then govern how you go about your student activism, if I can say.
From what you're speaking about, I hear you guys speaking a lot about students and what concerns students, but we are somehow neglecting the fact that you guys are also students. And yes, as leaders, you speak for people, but would you say there's representation for your needs, or would you say that your own personal needs, not personal interests, your own personal needs as a student, as like any other general students, are attended to? Like, how would you say, do you feel you have some sort of representation as to who can fight for you when you're trampling, who can fight for you when you're weak, who can stand for you when you need representation?
Honestly, from my perspective, I feel like the organizations from which we stem are the ones that fight for us, because the structures that are in place institutionally that are meant to fight for us are not doing so. So then we fall back on our homes, which are our organizations, and in this case the EFFSC. You can go to the EFFSC with any concern that you have relating to student life, and you are guaranteed that you are going to receive assistance. But should you maybe like go to one of the divisions of the university, for example, you might encounter difficulties in encountering that help, or rather finding help. So then I feel like we are seen, we are validated in our organizations, but I don't know what Tshepang thinks about it.
Yeah, I was asking if, do you also feel like there's some sort of representation for yourself as well, as a general student, as like any other student in the University of the Free State?
Yeah, my brother, you see, with my needs, because you see, once we've entered this space of leadership, it's somehow expected of you to let go of what you want, but you must, whatever you do must be for the benefit of everyone, right? So you can't necessarily just do something that only benefits you, right? So that's why we always reiterate to the thing that say that there are, as much as we're student leaders, we also go through the same issues that students they go through. Just a matter of us who are more vocal about them and we actually want to do something about them, right? So our needs are more aligned with other students, right? Just a matter of us, we in a way neglect them for theirs. So now, with that being neglected, the representation that you get or how you feel that you're represented is only through our political home, as Lindo has mentioned. Because if I might have an issue, as much as I'm an SRC member currently, there are other things that I'm going to have to go through, or there are other needs that I need to be catered of, or there are some things that I'm not quite sure of that I need to have assistance with. And that assistance cannot come from myself alone. I need to have people assisting me, you understand? For example, I didn't necessarily have funding at the beginning of the year, right? But I was in a position of, or would say a position of power, but I couldn't necessarily maneuver to get myself registered until I asked the EFFSC to come assist. And that's when we went to financial aid with the leadership of the EFFSC. Then now assistance was then now brought to my favor, you understand? So that's how I got to gathering assistance. So the only way our needs are catered for in this moment in time, or from our perspective, is through our own organization, because then that's where everyone is prioritized. As much as we prioritize students, but even amongst ourselves as leaders, we get to prioritize, because we can't necessarily lead people while we're having our own issues. So we must be able to solve our own issues before we can even beginning to solve others.
Yeah. Now I want to find out, what would you say is like the role of organizations in the university space?
Organizations play a major role, and it's somehow overlooked because it will be EFFSC, SASCO, and we're just seen as people that are just merely here for protesting, right? But it's not the case. We, first of all, in terms of governance, we assist the Office of Student Affairs, the entire Division of Student Affairs. We get to assist it with its daily runnings, because it will be us that are needed to go around and posting posters of elections. It will be us that will be required to mobilize students for events, right? If Student Affairs is hosting events, it will be, the onus will be on us, because we somehow represent the majority part of students, because each and every single student you meet, it might not be 5 out of 10, but you might get that it's 4 out of 10 students that are part of an organization, right, in the entire student populace. So we represent, in a way, voices of students that the students themselves cannot do it, even if they are a group themselves. So we play that role of we patch the gap between the SRC and the students, because even the SRC itself cannot function without organizations on campus, because without that, it means then now what's the thing is going to be the SRC on its own, 19 people having to then now cater for the needs of 32,000 students, right? But then whereas there's substructures, like it's not only organizations that assist us, there's also associations, there's also arts and culture councils, like, so there's other councils and residencies as well. So these other sub-councils act as a way of support and bridging the gap between the SRC and the students, irrespective of whichever council, because our student community is so broad. Yeah. So we do need representation from each and every single student community. That's why there's representation for quad students. That's why there's a representation for other students. That's why there's representation for arts. That's why there's representation for international students. So that each and every single community is catered for. While we still have the president, while we still have the deputy president, but there are other people that are also going to be representing that. But then now, in those councils, who sits in those councils is the chairpersons of organizations, of which those organizations are the ones that are going to bring up an overall view of what students are saying on the ground. So the organizations are the ones that interact with students on the ground. So SRCs do not necessarily engage with students on the ground, but the organizations do so.
You speak about student communities, residences, and all of that, and I want to find out from you, as an on-campus student, right? On campus, am I wrong? Former. Okay. There's some sort of like disconnect between students and governance, politics, and anything that has to do with like governance in the school, right? Would you say this is like an actual problem, and if that's the case, how do you think this can be addressed?
I think before anything else, we need to understand the nature of the space. I lived in a residence for 3 years. The nature of a residence is that everyone is there, and the priority of residences is to nurture a space that is, what's the word I'm looking for? To nurture a space that is basically, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm panicking. I don't know why I'm panicking. But yeah, basically residences nurture a space that is able to accommodate, or rather a space that is allowing for academics to thrive, basically. So at the focal point, residences need to nurture a space that allows for the thriving of academics. So then, according to them, or rather I think that they view organizations, or rather politics, as being something that would disturb students from this, because then you need to also take into account the fact that residences are made up of different people, and one of the basic values within residences and across residences is inclusivity. So inclusivity in terms of what we stand for as individuals, inclusivity in terms of what we believe in. So then by allowing one, for example, political organization to infiltrate the resident space, then what about the other organizations that would also want to do that? So then residences then they do not shy away, but basically they move away from the whole thing of wanting to include politics within their space, because the space in itself it's centered, or rather it's centered around governance and not on politics. So they're focused on governance. Politics are not on the menu in residences.
Yes, residences are space that are about learning, and they're not entirely about politics. But how do you think it can be addressed that there's like an actual disconnect between that and governance?
I think multiple engagements have been had on campus. I'm not going to lie to you. There are TCANs, there are seminars, there are engagements, dialogues in which student leaders from residences and student leaders from political organizations come together and discuss the same question that you've just posed to me. And what has been consistent and constant throughout these engagements is the fact that people in residences are disconnected from politics because of the nature and the space in which they exist. That is something that you cannot shy away from. In as much as you might want to say no, but it's the reality of the matter. People in residences are disconnected because of the space in which they exist. The space secludes them from politics, and the space, residence in this case, is not allowing for politics. It doesn't allow for politics to thrive. So then, sorry, as I was saying, then could you please just rephrase the question? My train of thought has been disturbed.
I was asking how can we address that disconnect between student political governance and
I think one of the ways in which we can address the disconnect is by maybe like highlighting the importance of politics, or rather the impact that politics has on everyone within the university space, because I think resident students think that because they live in residences and are on campus, they are not affected by issues that are, because resident students have this view that politics are for people that live off campus. So then they are not included in that. So then by pointing out the work that organizations, political organizations specifically, do for residences and for each and every student that is part of the constituency of the UFS, then maybe some light might come at the end of the tunnel that is this whole political and res debate.
I want to know, you were once RC first years, right? Would you say there's like any possible way you using that power you might have had then to canvass for votes and support for the EFF?
No, and I say this because as an RC, there is a code of conduct that you sign, and you have to abide by the code of conduct. Part of the clauses that are included within that code of conduct stipulate that you cannot do that. You cannot represent your own views, because the one view that needs to be mandated and pushed is that of the residents, and it's the view that aligns with the values of the residents. So then by doing that, by promoting an organizational agenda, for example, then you are breaching your contract, you're breaching the code of conduct. So no.
They have the impression is that they're always violent, and they follow a certain type of manner in terms of addressing issues that they feel need to be addressed and tapped on. But now I feel we need to find out, Uguti, how do you guys differ, or how do you distinguish yourself from like the actual political party in government? How do you differ in terms of what may be some sort of misrepresentation about them, like in terms of how do I phrase this? Word on the street is that EFF is violent, right? We all attest to that. You don't. Right. Now, what I want to find out now is how do you guys differ from that, especially considering that you are disagreeing with the idea that it's probably violent, so as to say.
Yeah, my brother. How the EFF is viewed as. Yeah, my brother. How the EFF is viewed as an anarchic movement, of which we wouldn't necessarily agree to that instance, because South Africa has ever since post-apartheid rather has not seen a movement so radical like the EFF. Because how we differ with the ANC is that the ANC, after attaining political power, they now stepped off the pedal in terms of them now making sure that the entire society, with part of their MDM movement, they didn't make sure that our society is fully represented. So now when EFF came in, for example, the reason why we're being told that we're violent is how our acts in parliament, right? And people think that a parliament is some honorable house that must be respected in the instance. So now, when we came in there, we found people that have been sleeping for years in parliament, not passing laws that are going to benefit the people of South Africa. So when we came in, our issue was that we must challenge the status quo, and if it means we must be disruptive in doing so, we are going to then now take that route to be disruptive. If it means that our voices must be heard and our electoral base must be supported and have their views heard in parliament.
So there's been like 2 years of threat to student organizations, and this year around it's DASO. What do you have to say about that?
With the entire notion of depoliticizing the student organization space, or the student governance space rather, it's something that then it's being pushed. I don't want to mention names that are going to maybe in a way contradict ourselves, but it's been pushed within the institution to say that we should move away from student organizations, because we pose a serious threat to, first of all, the brand of the university as UFS as a whole. Because whenever there's a strike and we're on SABC or we're on where there's a protest strike at UFS, and that in itself is damaging to the name of the UFS, right? So they are trying to in any way make sure that all of those things are suppressed. By how then do you do that? You get to put independent people, right? You get an individual, because an individual would not necessarily be listening to a group of people telling them, look, today we're going to be doing something like this. They're going to act on their own accord, and them being part of being favored by the people that are wanting them to be depoliticizing, or the ones that are going to be agents of depoliticizing, right? They're going to be, in a way, be given benefits that are going to derail them from actually representing students, right? So that's why the management, or what's this thing, it doesn't want student political organizations to be the ones that are being at the forefront of winning SRC elections, being at the forefront of championing the interests of students. Because once you have political organizations in SRC, right, there are strategic meetings that needs to happen. There's specific portfolios that committees as well that needs to be represented to, where there's needed for student representation. So when we come there, of course, as Lindo mentioned, that when you have a political home, you have an ideology, right, as to how you see things. So now when we arrive at this type of meetings, we, in any way, or the mandate we get is from our political organization. So we get there, we try to represent that mandate, or try to make sure that mandate comes to materialization, right? So now when that happens, the management doesn't want that, because it goes against what they want to do as far as students are concerned, right? So now, with independence rising, it was a thing that was not necessarily supported by students, but it was pushed down on students' throats by people, but I won't want to mention names as well, you understand? So now, with DASO coming in, DASO in itself is a political organization. We cannot shy away from it or distance itself from being political. It's just that they are political, but then theirs is in a liberal sense than what maybe SASCO and EFF are aligned to, right? So now their politics are to ensure that everybody is equal and we do things in a liberal sense, of which the system in itself would not allow at this moment in time for us to be having liberal ideals that are going to be implemented on students, because that's not what the current system wants. The current system needs to be challenged, and the only way to do so is to be radical and push an agent of transformation. Because if you're then now bringing liberalism, you are not pushing for transformation. You're saying that things should be staying the same. But they should stay the same, also benefiting certain type of people, while those people do not necessarily need anything of benefit because they are better off, right? So their belief is that everyone should be better off regardless of whether you're poor or what, right? Then that's not where we are, because we feel that the majority of the students that are here, we have approximately around 22,000 students that are almost NSFAS funded, right? So you cannot say that everybody deserves to be equal in that instance, where there's only 10% that's minority, and you have 90% that's the ones that are black and marginalized, you understand? So with DASO, it's not necessarily an independent organization. They are a political organization, but their political beliefs are very much different from ours.
they differ. But now I want to know, because when we speak about student problems, we speak about matters including registration, we speak about matters including tuition fees, we speak about such matters. But then how do you guys as political parties and political representations, there's some sort of, I want to imagine a space where you guys speak together and solve issues together on a set of table, and as political parties and as student leaders, right? But then I don't necessarily believe that there's such an environment. Is there such an environment where you see yourself working together with all the other parties to achieve a certain goal for the students?
Yes, my brother, because one thing we should always be wary of is that even if... Yes, my brother, because one thing we should always be wary of is that even if, for example, last year, the DASO elections of last year happened in the way that the EFFSC won 4 seats and the independents won 3 seats. For us, it was just unfortunate that it was independent, so it was not a nice working environment, because we couldn't necessarily come to the party because independents do not necessarily have an ideology and they were not necessarily prepared to deal with mass student issues, right? So now from our side, we were willing to then now engage, say that let's put politics aside, because our politics must not in any way or whenever they must never affect students. We can have our own internal political battles, or we can have our own political differences, but then students must not be at the forefront of receiving such an environment where now they are going to be affected by us playing politics, right? We can play politics, but then students must be very far from the politics. We must be able to set on campus.
That's very beautiful to hear, because one may assume that as you are in position and as you have occupied your leadership status, you then forget that the main reason you are in all of this is because of students. And as different parties with different views and different solutions as to how to achieve certain solutions to certain challenges, one may assume that it becomes then difficult for you guys to also remember the main goal and the main reason you are in the leadership spaces. But now, what would you say are the responsibilities of non-organizational students? How do they get involved when they are not satisfied?
With non-organizational students, because every student, because our with non-organizational students, because every student, because our perception would be that every student is part of an organization, but we do know that there's a larger part of the majority that's not part of organizations. That's why even when SRC elections come up, they're not necessarily interested in SRC elections. They're not interested in voting, and it's understood and justified, because for them it feels like they don't necessarily have a platform where they can raise their voice, right? And we've seen that in the current constitution doesn't necessarily provide for or mandate a student or a president to give a presidential address to students all the time, so that all students from all walks of the UFS community are able to join, whether they form part of an association or organization, but they must just come as an individual student coming from class, joining the mass meeting as an individual student, saying that no, but I'm affected by this and this and this and this. It seems like it's not being addressed. And those views are also catered for, just that now the challenge would be to get those students to be interested in coming out and voicing out their concerns, right? The one thing we lack here at UFS is a platform for students to come and actually voice out their concerns. They rely on political organizations to be the ones that are voicing out their concerns. And of course, there are going to be those students that do want to raise their concerns, but the platform is not there. So ours is to create a platform for students that are going to be able to come on a daily basis, or even if it's a matter of an imbizo, or you call a student hota, or you call a student imbizo, where you call all students that are whether political or non-political. As a matter of fact, the sitting, how it's called, it must not be called through organizations or through what. The SRC in itself must be the one calling us as a student in Bizo, saying that no, all students are invited. Let's go to Rec Farm, let's go to Shimla, let's go elsewhere, where we're going to be in our thousands, and we're going to hear every single submission right from students. And alternatively, what we can also create is that we encourage students to visit the SRC offices, because I feel like there maybe you as an individual student can feel safe because you're going to an office, right? There's no need for you to be seeing other people and anything interfering you from going there and voicing your content. You're just going to the office, you're going to see the respective office bearer. It's just you and the office bearer inside the office. You tell them what you're going through and they're able to solve it as well. But we must be able to encourage students to do so. They must feel encouraged to be able to go to the SRC, right? They must not see SRC as the thing, or no, man, we can't even reach these people. There must be, SRC members should be accessible to students at all times. It must not be that also they are going to be found at offices only. It must be that the SRC itself decides on a weekend to say that, no, let's go to off campus, let's go to universities and study universities, where we're going to call students of universities in one central venue. We hear their crisis of private accommodation and what they're going through in their communities. You go to Brandbach, there's an open center. You go to the Brandbach Open Center, you call students. So you see, those type of platforms are things that we are lacking. But with the EFFSC-led SRC, that's the platforms that we want to create. Because in ourselves, we've been in SRC for 2 terms, but we have not necessarily had the majority of students coming to complain, or we've not necessarily had to extend our ears to those students. So we're trying to create that gap, to merge that gap of where we've been missing in terms of addressing student issues, because we only rely on what we receive. We must be able to go to students and ask them personally ourselves as the SRC. Yes.
I'd love to believe that this week has been one very hectic week. I mean, student activation and manifesto presentations. How has that been?
It has been a tough week, but we're used to it. This is my 3rd elections that I'm going to be partaking in, and this time for me it's very much difficult because I'm a candidate now, right? So it's been one tough week because I had to be on the ground every single day to ensure that I do make sure that students are aware that we are voting next week and they know which party to vote for, or rather campaign for the EFFSC.
And it's clear now that you guys are going into elections without a precedent, right? And I'd like to find out now, does it put pressure on you as the deputy president candidate? Does it put...
No, of course, the pressure is there. When the final list came out, we thought it was going to come out with favorable responses, meaning that our presidential candidate was going to be on the ballot. But then now, seeing that the final list came out and none of those things have happened, the pressure on me is quite a lot. But with the collective of the SRC members that I'm going to be coming into office with, the other 5 candidates, the weight has, in a way, being lifted off my shoulder, because we are then now working together hand in hand in trying to make sure that all 6 of us do get to be in office, so that I'm not the only one going into office, or there's not only 2 of us or 3 of us that are going to office. We're all going into office. So without a presidential candidate, of course, it puts a serious threat to our campaign, because we don't necessarily have the face of the campaign, or the ones that the person that students are going to be looking forward to hearing what their plans are, because normally we know that students are only focusing on what the president is going to be doing for them, regardless of other portfolios, right? Because the president carries the entire slate of people, meaning if we are 7, the president is the one who's going to be carrying the entire 7 people, must be speaking on behalf of the entire 7. You understand? So now, without having that face, we knew what we were going to be doing coming into elections, and we accepted the fact that the university does not want our presidential candidate to run. You understand? So now it's a thing of saying, no, it's fine. We'll just try to do our level best to make sure that as much as we do not have a presidential candidate, we do not necessarily leave students behind. We are going to be going to office, and we're going to make sure that we implement even what the president had envisioned for students. We're going to incorporate what the president has envisioned for students and incorporate in all our manifestos as the 6 remaining candidates.
So at Equitas yesterday for the manifesto presentation, there's some sort of activation and some sort of representations that you guys as parties have. You guys sing, you guys use...
Yeah, sing is jubilant, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a party that was throwing balloons in the sky, and you guys were popping balloons. And towards the end, I heard one song say EFFSC and what do you guys have to say about that?
With regards to the balloons being thrown, it was, for us, we found it a bit childish, but we understood that DASO, it's their first time contesting, and of course the excitement is there, because we cannot be in a setting where we're going to be giving students our manifestos for them to be encouraged to vote, but we're popping balloons inside the venue, the same venue where students are supposed to be in. So it shows that there's a lack of political maturity from their side, but we're able to live with it. So now, with them singing those songs, I mean, my brother, everybody feels entitled to sing how they sing. The lyrics, they change the lyrics how they want to suit their lyrics, because then now they cannot be direct as to what are they singing about, or they cannot bring forward exactly what they're singing about, right? Because for them it's just maybe based on allegations or based on rumors, you understand? So you cannot be singing and saying that now it's targeted at this specific person because this specific person did this, or this specific person was doing this. The same thing as when Zenu Zuma. there are still people still singing when Zeni Zuma, even though some know what he did and some know a different perception of what he did. So it's a matter of those songs in a way are provocative because they were used in the struggle at times, but then with DASO we didn't know anything about struggle. So you see, so the songs for us, how they are using it is based on maybe trying to create a smear campaign or decampaign the EFFSC as a whole, because we're being viewed as a violent party.
Right. So as we wrap up, I want to find out from you, my sister, how would you say students can support the EFFSC? How can they get involved?
How can students get involved and support? They can support the EFFSC by voting in the upcoming SRC elections, which are taking place from the 22nd until the 24th of August, which is next week, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Students can also get involved by, if maybe they are interested, signing membership forms and becoming part of the organization. We're always available at the bridge. There's always a table with comrades there. If anyone is interested, they can just approach us. We're very nice people, very approachable. Everyone is welcome.
There you have it. They're not only radical people, but they are also very approachable and friendly people. I've seen it myself, and they're very chilled. It has been lovely having you guys here.
Yeah, it was
Thank
nice.
you
It was
so
nice.
much for taking the time off your busy schedules to join us. And from me, Tshepang Panda, goodbye to you, goodbye to me, goodbye to us. Let's talk UFS.
And
And it's a wrap.
So Divane Ballet. Hey, do we stand or what's happening?
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, my brother. Thank you.